a public I work as a public school teacher. I've been a public school teacher now for 5 years. In the past, I worked in the restaurant industry as a community organizer. I used to be an organizer in defense of NYCHA when they were trying to privatize homes towers. So it's a struggle that I'm very, very familiar with. And a lot of the things that you will just mentioned in your presentation are things that we have been fighting for as a party, right? We've been fighting for the end of the privatization of NYCHA. As a political party, we've been fighting against RAD, PACT, Infill, Air Rights, and Blueprint, and the Blueprint for Change. And the reason for that is because we believe that housing should be public, right? We actually are calling for the Fair Cloth Amendment to be repealed, which means so that we could create even more public housing. And the way we, a lot of times when people talk about public housing, they say, well, it needs to be privatized because there's not enough money, right? There's not enough money in order to fix the infrastructure. The reason that there's not enough money, though, is if we look at where the money's going, I mean, NYCHA's paying $70 million a year to the NYPD. So when they're saying there's no money, we see robots. They have enough money to put expensive dog robots inside of NYCHA to police the community. And we understand that these type of tactics are the ones that lead to the arrest of our youth, to the kidnapping of our youth, sending them to Rikers, and many times even the death of our youth, like we saw with Akai Gurley. We understand that criminalization creates a cycle in our communities, and it creates no clear path for liberation. So that's why we're saying we want funds to be reallocated from the police to housing, to violence intervention programs. But also we know that the chairman of NYCHA is making $400,000 a year to run NYCHA, and the reason that he was contracted for that job is because he's known to privatize NYCHA public housing throughout the country. So, we know that there's budgets that could be cut, salaries that could be cut. And on top of that, one of our main points, our first point in our platform is taxing the rich. So in New York City, we have the most amount of millionaires and billionaires than any other city in the country, probably more than most cities in the world, right? And then we are the ones that are creating that collective wealth. But it's a collective wealth, and we create it, but only the rich reap all of the profits, and they don't pay taxes on that, right? While we get wages that aren't enough to even pay for our housing, to pay for public education, like higher education, to pay for our food, for healthy food. Many of us are living in food deserts. So what we're saying is, let's tax the rich. And with those taxes, let's fully fund the infrastructure of NYCHA, and let's fully fund the MTA, the infrastructure of the MTA, make it public and free. We know that privatizing NYCHA is not to the betterment of NYCHA. We know that the settlements, I think in Queens, Oceans Bay, is a NYCHA place that has been privatized, and they've had the largest number of residents, NYCHA residents, that have been evicted since it's been privatized. Okay, so we know that the push to privatize NYCHA is not about fixing NYCHA, because the funds are there to be fixed, right? We have $1 trillion for the military budget. Just one F-35A fighter costs $85 million, right? So our government has the money to fully fund public housing throughout the country, but it's choosing not to, right? Because it wants it to be privatized, so that once it's privatized, all of they could raise the rent. And then once they raise the rent, all of that money goes to one man who probably is financing their campaigns, like we see with Eric Adams, who's the candidate that has received the most amount of money from real estate developers and is actually pushing for public-private partnerships in NYCHA. So yeah, but we wanna, not only do we want to just protect NYCHA, but we want to, one of the other points that we also have that's very important about NYCHA is taking away the law that says that if somebody has a criminal record or somebody has some type of criminal past, that they can no longer live in NYCHA, because we understand that this is a form of marginalizing and discriminating against people that are re-entering society, so much so that it's creating a path where they don't have many options and they're forced into many times homelessness. So part of our platform is about creating housing for all. So fully funding NYCHA, making it, keeping it public, and expanding NYCHA is very important to us. On top of that, we also have the points of making New York City a rent control city. So NYCHA residents right now, they pay 30% of their income to rent. We're saying that affordable housing is when people are only paying 20% of their income to housing. So we want to create a law that would make New York City a rent control city, so that nobody's paying more than 20% of their income for housing. And that way we can ensure that every single person in New York City has true affordable housing, not the affordable housing that they're trying to sell us with the lottery apartments, where they're trying to get us to pay $2,000 a month for a 1-bedroom. That's not affordable housing. And on top of that, we want to completely eradicate homelessness. We know that there are more vacant lots and vacant apartments than there are people in homeless shelters at the moment. So we want to seize those vacant lots and vacant apartments and create permanent housing for people in homeless shelters, as opposed to continuing to fund this like homeless industrial complex where they create shelters and create jobs, but it doesn't actually fix or create long-term solutions or housing for people that are experiencing homelessness. And of course, we want to protect tenants' rights by taking action against landlords for tenants' rights violations. And we know, just from my work in NYCHA, from our advocacy, our campaigning, we've seen the conditions in NYCHA. A lot of people are living in roach-infested apartments with broken plumbing, no heat, no water, very little water pressure, elevator outages that literally are making elders, basically are keeping them trapped in their apartments. Hallways that are littered with trash that are never cleaned, right? So we know that part of our platform is about taking action against landlords. And we know that NYCHA is one of the worst landlords, if not the worst landlord of New York City. So we would definitely continue our work, because I don't want to say we're going to start trying to hold NYCHA accountable, because this is work that we've been doing with Holmes and Isaacs. We've been doing in Queensbridge. This is work that we've been doing as a political party for years, defending NYCHA and defending the tenants in NYCHA. And me as an activist, I've been doing this for 10 years already. So this isn't, I don't want to say like, now I'm getting involved because, I'm running a campaign, and it's really not about the campaign. Also, I want to make that clear. This is really about making a movement of New Yorkers that are uniting and around all of the issues that are affecting working class people, right? Police brutality, the issue of safety, the lack of access to housing, the lack of access to healthcare. So we want to create a movement that goes past just voting, right, on November 2nd, even though, we would love for you all to vote for us so that, we show a strong force in New York City and are able to show the power that working class people have when we unite. But we know that our work needs to continue every day after that, and that we need to continue to protect working class people every day after that, and advocate for all the issues that affect us. So with that, that's a little bit of a introduction about me and how our platform and our party has been engaged in a defense of nature, a defense of public housing, a call to expand public housing. And I don't know if you guys want to ask me questions or.
Yes, yes. So it is amazing to be here. I'm going to call up one of our power players and one of our strong leaders in the community to go through our set of questions. We ask all of our candidates the same exact questions. I think you might have answered many of them, so feel free to take this as an opportunity to expand on some of the things that you've mentioned. But for the record, I've heard you called the Socialist Candidate, but I have to admit, honestly, which party? I don't know. Which party are you representing?
I'm running for the Party for Socialism and Liberation, which is the political party that I've been a part of now for about 4 to 5 years.
Thank you. And now I bring up one of our stars to go through our list of questions. We have Mr. Ronald Toppins. Mr. Ronald Toppins is a steering committee member. He is also the Resident Association president of John Adam Houses. And without further ado, I'm going to turn the mic over to Ronald.
Yes. First of all, I want to thank you for showing up and coming in and being a part of our weekly meetings that we have with RPPH. So you're welcome. As Marquise has already said to you, we've interviewed several of the mayor candidates, Democratic mostly, and we also even Republican and so forth. If they're independents, we'll be glad to have a conversation with them because people that's going to run New York City, we need to know what their views are with RPPH. So I must admit that I was impressed with some of the work that you have been doing and some of the things that you were just saying. So I'm very happy to hear that. And I know I'm familiar very much with Holmes Towers and all the other areas that you spoke about. So thank you for showing up. And I'm just going to jump right into the questions. Okay. Now, how do you pronounce your last name?
Rojas.
Rojas.
So you can say Rojas.
Rojas. Okay. Thank you so much, Cathy. And thank you once again for coming. And welcome and good afternoon to RPPH members, constituents, coalition, and what have you. Marquise, one favor, please send Thomas McKinney the link. Okay. First question, Cathy. What does the concept of public housing mean to you?
So the concept of public housing is really about looking at housing as a human right, not as something that people should make profit out of. The privatizing housing is only created so that people could create profit of people who need somewhere to live, when really it should be a human right where everybody should have access to housing. So when we have public housing, it's state run, it's public, it's run by the state through the taxes that people are paying, right, through our taxes, and it's guaranteed to be affordable and accessible to working class people. And that would mean that they can't charge more than a certain level. So when you have private housing, today you could be paying $1,000 for a 1-bedroom, and tomorrow the landlord could choose to raise it to $2,000. When you have public housing, they need to ensure that they're either doing it by your salary. What we're calling for is for housing payments to be determined by people's salary. So it's for it to be capped at 20% of people's salary. And I know NYCHA right now is at 30%. We're saying that given all of the other payments that people have to make, 30% is not affordable, and we're calling for 20%.
Thank you very much. My next question would be, do you see public housing as part of New York City, greater community? And if so, how do you see it?
Absolutely. I mean, NYCHA is essential. It's like to New York City's housing, right? We know we have the largest housing complexes in the country. We know how many people are dependent, working class people are dependent on NYCHA housing in order to have somewhere to live, because of the fact that New York City is, you know, like I said, the country with the most, the city with the most millionaires and billionaires in the world. And we know that because of that, they continue to privatize more and more and more lands. And that causes the rent to continue to spike and spike and spike. And NYCHA is the only thing left in New York City that is the true representation of affordability left in New York. So what we're calling for is for, like I said, 20% of people's income, but NYCHA is the closest thing to that. There's no other type of housing in New York City that could represent what affordable housing can look like, what public housing could look like, other than NYCHA. And there's no other housing development that is really truly being rent controlled, right? So what we need is to expand NYCHA so that we show and we demonstrate that housing needs to be public and it needs to be affordable for all. We can't hear you, Ronald. You're on mute.
Can you hear? Yes, our next question would be, and thank you for that. What is your position regarding NYCHA's blueprint for change?
Mm-hmm. So we are against all types of privatization of NYCHA, whether it's RAD, PAC, Info, sale of rights, or the blueprint for change. We understand that, what this is that it will just transfer NYCHA properties to a trust to give them greater flexibility to seek private financing. And we understand that when anything becomes privatized, then there will always be the profit motive. And that if there is a profit motive, they will always try to increase the rent, right? So when we look at private developers, their interest is in direct contrast to the interest of tenants, right? Because they want to make the most amount of money from that piece of land and those developments. And what does that mean? That they're going to raise the rents, they're going to try to evict tenants in order to make those apartments market rate, and they're going to start cutting costs as much as they can. Imagine cutting more costs in NYCHA, right? Where, they're not going to be fixing the plumbing, they're not going to be fumigating or painting or doing all the repairs that are necessary, because when it's a private entity, they're going to try to cut as many costs as possible in order to continue to ensure their profit. So what we're saying is that we support the NYCHA staying public, right? And we don't support any plan to privatize NYCHA.
Thank you very much. The next question would be, what would you do to facilitate compliance with HUD? Okay, the regulations of 964 regarding resident participation.
Mm-hmm. Well, we know that NYCHA right now is being administered. Like I said, the chairman is making $400,000, and he was hired specifically so that he can privatize NYCHA, right? So we understand that the people that are right now taking control of NYCHA is they're doing so in efforts to privatize it, right? So what we want to do is we want to have more tenant participation. So we know that NYCHA needs to listen to its tenants for real, because they're the ones that are actually living in the buildings. They know exactly what needs to be done in the buildings, and it's federally required for them to listen to NYCHA residents under the 964. But they don't actually do it. And they claim that they have a tenant participation in their privatization lines, but we know privatization plans, but we know that that's not real. So we want to actually reinforce 964 in order to give tenants more power in NYCHA. And we want to kind of take away this myth that there isn't enough money for them to fully fund NYCHA when the police budget is $11 billion, when we're spending $1 trillion on the military force, when they have people in NYCHA administration making $400,000 while their residents are literally living in roach and rodent infested apartments. So we want to take away that myth by taxing the rich and finding out how much we would tax the rich based on how much money we need to fully fix the infrastructure of NYCHA.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. I always said, D, it's time to stop attacking one another. It's time to start going after the wealthy. So I agree with that. All right. Do you think that there should be some significant funding allocated to resident education, participation, and increased self-sufficiency, the social initiatives, or is it just about repairs and renovations? Do I need to redo that?
Yes,
Sorry. So I'm gonna go through it very slowly. Do you think there should be significant funding allocated to resident education, resident participation, and increased self-sufficiency, the social initiatives, or is it just about the repairs and renovation?
Well, because we believe that at the end of the day, any state, whether any government agency, anything run by the state, it needs to be really run by the people, right? And in this case, the people are the tenants. So we say yes to all of the above. We need repairs, but we also need programming, and we need to empower tenants so that they know their rights, so that they, their voices are being listened to, and so that they are creating the solutions that NYCHA needs to see, because it is those people, it is people that are the most impacted that know what the community needs at every level, right? Whether we're facing food insecurity, whether we're facing lack of housing, whether we're facing police brutality, it is the community itself that could create the solutions in order to really transform our communities. So we definitely say yes to all of the above, and we want to empower tenants in order for them to truly have a say and a voice in their living.
Very good. I enjoyed that answer. I'm just looking here for my last and final question that I want to ask you. I had them. Marquise?
Yes.
Yes. Can you do that last question for me? Because I had trying to pull it up on this thing.
All right. So full disclosure, I don't have it in front of me. So what I'll do is I'll expand on one of the questions Ronald asked around the 964 regulations. You did a pretty good job of sort of outlining how sort of the Housing Authority has been sort of skirting and not being able to sort of enforce it in any way, shape, or form. What would you do differently? Like, how would you ensure that those rules are being protected and enforced, and people and there's accountability behind not following those regulations?
Well, one of our platform points is to take strong action against landlords for tenant rights violations. And what that means in this case would be either doing, creating fines, or having, creating a rule where if apartments are not up to par to the living standards that are necessary to live a dignified life, then people should not be paying rent and should be using that rent should be used to fix those apartments. But on top of that, we need to start firing all the people in NYCHA administration that are not truly taking action to make the repairs that are necessary to ensure that all NYCHA residents are living a dignified life and that are not living in apartments that need plumbing fix with dirty hallways or elevators that are not working. So our platform calls for taking more action. whether that means fining landlords, whether that means firing people in NYCHA administration. And we definitely need to reduce, I mean, nobody should be getting paid $400,000 to run NYCHA while people's lives like literally are living in inhumane conditions, criminal conditions. I mean, I've seen some apartments in NYCHA that it's truly criminal the way that people are living. So there should be nobody in the NYCHA administration that has a $400,000 salary when people are living like that. So I think that those are some things that we would do, but at every level, we would be, as socialists, socialism plainly without, all of the theory, it just means putting humanity, human rights over profit. So at every level, because I'm a socialist, if I become mayor, at every decision that I'm making would always center the needs of the people, whether the tenants or the people that are historically oppressed, working class people. And at every level, I would be taking working class people's side instead of those who the administration of NYCHA, the wealthy, the rich, the landlords, etc.
Yes. Okay, Mark, I'm ready for this final question for you, and I apologize for that. Okay, my question to you would you be willing to facilitate, if you're becoming elected mayor with compliance to the HUD regulations at 964? That's always a problem, so would you be willing to facilitate?
Yes, definitely. We support the 964 and anything that we can do to empower and give more power to tenants as opposed to landlords, and put tenants in charge of making the livelihood in NYCHA better, and not having just superficial participation, but having real participation where tenants have the power to truly impact all the decisions that are made. We would support that. So anything, whether it's facilitating that or however we could enforce that, we will do that.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much. That'll be all for me. And we'll turn you back over to Marquise and to the group.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ronald. You always do an amazing job for us. Thank you. All right. So here's the part where we open it up. We have about 36 experts on this call, mostly tenant association presidents spread out all across the city, Brooklyn, Manhattan, Queens, Staten Island is definitely in the house today. So I'm going to open it up for them to ask some questions. For those of you who have questions, I'm going to ask you that we all play a role in making sure we get to everyone's questions. So one, please keep your questions short and get to your questions. Two, if I don't see you, I'm asking others to help me spot people who have questions. And if you don't get spotted, as soon as you see that or recognize that pause moment, feel free to come off mute and jump in and say, hey, I've been trying to ask my question for quite some time. I'll be honest, I'm not going to catch all of you. So I really need you guys to help me with this portion so that we can get through as many as possible. And then finally, before I open it up, Cathy, please keep me on time. I'm not sure what time you need to go, but give me a 3 to 5 minute heads up because I want to make sure that we get to your closing remarks as well.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you.
Thank you. And so first up, I have Ms. Dana Alden.
Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome, Ms. Rojas. We appreciate you coming before us today. My name is Dana Eldon, and I'm the president of St. Mary's Park Houses Resident Council. I'm also a member of RPPH. First, I have the statement, and it's in regard to what you spoke on in regard to expanding NYCHA, so that the quality of life, I'm believing, is what you're speaking of, would be extended and improved for many in NYCHA. So I would like for you to expound on that. That's number one. And number two, which I've asked of other candidates as well, being a senior who is disabled and living on a fixed income, it concerns me that many of us are being encouraged and forced almost by NYCHA to turn from Section 9 to Section 8. And for many of us, that would not be a feasible move financially, as some have pensions and their pension amounts may jeopardize their ability to receive Section 8 benefits.
Mhm.
So what is your position on that in regard to forcing residents, and in particular to seniors who are on fixed incomes, into this Section 8 program? Thank you.
Yes, thank you. So in terms of the expanding NYCHA, so what I'm referring to is so basically there is the Federal Fair Cloth Amendment that was passed in 1999 that prevents new public housing from being built. And what we're saying is we need to repeal the Fair Cloth Amendment in order to create new public housing throughout New York City. The reason for that is because, like I said before, when a development is private, right, the interest of the landlord is always in direct contradiction to the interest of the tenant. They're always going to want to raise the rent, cut costs by not making the necessary repairs, and they're always going to want to really get the most amount of profit that they can from the tenants. So we believe that housing should be public, given it's a human right, and that it should be affordable, right? Which is why we also have the rent control point in our platform. But basically what we're saying when we say expand NYCHA is to repeal the Fair Cloth Amendment and create more NYCHA developments throughout New York City. In terms of the Section 9 to Section 8, we know that Section 9 is real public housing. Section 8 has a private landlord and a private management, which is why there will probably be an increase in rent because they want to make more profit off the tenants. There's also less protections from eviction when people are moved from Section 9 to Section 8. So we support Section 9. We support real public housing, and we do not support pushing tenants to move from Section 9 to Section 8, because we understand that no person, but especially no senior, should be at risk of losing their housing. I don't know if that
Thank you. Yes, thank you. I'm just looking to see if we have any questions. I'm not seeing, oh, wait, a hand just went up. We have Mr. Jonathan Salazar.
Thank you very much, Marquise. Hello, my name is Jonathan Salazar. I am a public housing activist with Save Section 9, and I'm also an environmental activist with Sunrise NYC.
Mm-hmm.
So I have two questions. The first question is, can I get a commitment from you for Save Section 9 to sign our petition, which is asking for the cancellation of the blueprint and for the removal of Greg Russ? And the second question is, would you also support legislation like the Green New Deal for public housing as a means to fully fund public housing, as opposed to these other schemes that are designed to privatize public housing?
Mm-hmm. Yes, we will, I would just have to read it and make sure that, but yeah, we will definitely want to sign that. That's something that we would be interested in signing. Like I said, we have the PSL for many years has been fighting to protect public housing, truly public housing, and we don't agree with Section 9 being converted to Section 8. So that's something that we would definitely support. We support any legislation that supports and improves public housing. So we would definitely support the Green New Deal being expanded in NYCHA in order to better fund NYCHA and also make it more environmentally sustainable.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. I'm looking for hands, see if anyone has questions. I have Miss Cynthia Tibbs.
So
sorry.
mine, can you hear me?
Yes, I made him. Yes, I accidentally took Cathy up, but I'm getting it back. Go ahead, ask your question. She'll be back.
Okay, you want me to wait?
No, you could go ahead.
So it's a two-part question. Number one, for the tenants that are currently in RAD, how would she get them out of it and put back into Section 9? Because they are living in horrific conditions, just like the rest of us are.
Mm-hmm.
Second part to my question would be, since you want to defund the police and NYCHA depends on the relationships that they have with the PSAs and the police to protect us,
Mm-hmm.
violence interrupters don't do it. So how do you expect, with the crime rate going up? We had a triple shooting over here last week. So
Mhm.
how are our residents going to be protected if your goal is to defund the police and we don't have them anymore? Because
Mhm.
clearly we need them.
Mhm.
Not every, no offense, but not every cop is racist. Not every cop attacks people. We have a great working relationship with ours.
Mhm.
So what is your goal? Besides violence interrupters, because I don't want to hear that nonsense, and I don't want to hear about no social workers. That doesn't help when I have tenants that are getting shot.
Mhm. Okay, let's start with the first question. So with the first questions in terms of RAD has failed, and we have been seeing that there has been an investigation and repairs are not happening. We, at the end of the day, you know, we would want to repeal RAD. We understand that it would be a struggle, but a lot, you know, we know that with people behind us, with people supporting us, that the most important thing is the power of the people and creating a mass movement in order to repeal RAD. But on top of that, because we're making New York City a rent control city, then all apartments would have to abide by not charging more than 20% of people's income for rent.
So how would that go into effect for those developments that have been put into RAD since 2017? How would that affect them?
If we went against RAD?
Yes. How would you get them out of the program?
So
They are
that's what we're
currently in
saying.
it.
So we would create a campaign in terms of repealing RAD. Does that make sense? So we would try to take RAD away. We understand that it wouldn't be something that's going to happen one day to another, but we would have to explore how to make that happen legally. But we understand that RAD has failed. So a lot of politicians are coming and they're like, RAD is good and we need to expand it. What I'm saying is RAD is bad. RAD has failed. And we will do what we need to explore and do whatever we can in order to legally repeal RAD. And that's our commitment.
Okay, and the police question.
And the police question. Okay, so basically what we're trying to do is reallocate $6 billion from the police and use it to fully fund our communities, right? Because we understand that communities that are not fully funded will face crime, right? And I'm a high school teacher. I live in Richmond Hill. I want to feel safe. I know that I love all my students, and they live in Corona, which has also saw an uptick of violence in 2020. But I want them to feel safe from in their community, but also feel safe from police violence, right? But so really what we're saying is, let's look at the numbers, right? Because even in shootings, right, and historically in New York City, you can ask people, police come after the shootings. They're not actually there to prevent the crime, right? To prevent the conflict. They're not doing conflict resolution. They're not sitting down with two people that have conflict and trying to dissuade them from fighting. They're there after someone has been killed, right? And throughout a 10-year study that was done by the University of Utah, they found that only 3% of major crimes, like the shootings that you were talking about, actually were resolved, right? That they actually
no offense. This is New York, not Utah. Second of all,
it was a national study.
Gang related. These are gang related fights. You have nobody that can predict ahead of time when a gang member is going to start shooting someone. So if you're going to remove police, what is your agenda for keeping people safe on a daily basis, especially in housing where we have the highest gang rate?
Ma'am, I'm trying to get to it, but I need you to let me finish, please. So as I was saying, so it was a national study that included a study within the NYPD. So we're looking at what works, right? Because only 3% of those major crimes, like the shootings, were actually solved. So then we're looking at violence intervention programs, and we're looking at the studies and the statistics. A study from 2017 from John Jay in New York City found that the effectiveness of violence intervention in New York City saw a 63% reduction in shootings and a 37% reduction in gun injuries in the South Bronx, and a 50% reduction in gun injuries in East New York. And this is, when you compare it to the 3%, it's actually much more effective. So what we're saying is, and the way that that works is through conflict resolution, and the way that that works is through fully funding communities, job placement, after school programs, mentorship, but they also have what is known as credible messengers. Now, credible messengers are people that were formerly incarcerated, that are well known in their community, that have ties, may have had ties in the past to street organizations or what are otherwise known as gangs, and can have intel and have shown to have intel in those communities to be respected in order to know when gang violence or a gang a dispute is going to happen before it happens, and they intervene. Whether that means even going to kids' high schools and walking them home from their high school and making and creating meetings between the parents and the kids in order to prevent a shooting, whether that means being outside in the block every single day, you know, these are things, and creating relationships with people in order to create conflict resolution and mentor youth. And this has statistically proven to be better at reducing gun shootings and reducing violence in communities. But on top of that, we know that the communities that are most well-funded, that have access to housing, that have access to jobs, to after-school programs, to mental health services, to drug rehabilitation programs, that those communities see the reduction in crime. And that's what we're also going to be focusing on funding as long-term solutions, and violence intervention programs as short-term solutions.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. And that question, heated as it may be, that is definitely giving me a topic for one of our next coalition meetings. Next up, we have a power player. We have Mr. Reginald Bowman.
Good afternoon, everybody, or good evening. And how are you, Madam Candidate?
I'm good. Thank you so much for asking.
One of the primary things that I always ask when I'm dealing with the subject of public housing, and I've been a resident and resident leader and involved in politics for 35, 40 years. One of the things that always interests me is what is the actual proposal that you have on your platform for modernizing, repairing, and restoring public housing now that it has reached its present condition. It's very practical and also very popular to always talk about what we are against. My interests are, what are your practical proposals for dealing with the massive infrastructure and management issues that the housing authority residents are currently facing, and the fact that the negligence that has gone on for the last 2.5 to 3 decades are now putting some of these buildings into a condition where they could possibly be condemned and demolished. So what are your proposals for restoration of the infrastructure, repair, and the preserving of the public housing stock that would be done, and a practical timetable that you think would be feasible for making those things happen?
So in terms of how we would receive the funds in order to make these repairs, our first point is taxing the rich. So there's over 500 super rich that in New York City that earn more than $25 million a year. So we know that we're going to look at what amount of money is needed in order to fully fund the infrastructure of NYCHA and the infrastructure of the MTA, and we're going to, with that, begin to tax the rich and reallocate money from the military, also from all of our military budget and our policing budget, in order to use that money to fully fund all the repairs and the infrastructure that needs to happen in NYCHA. But also we want to make it green and sustainable. That way we can ensure good quality housing for the long term.
I hear the answer to your question.
Mm-hmm.
Some of the answers that you just gave are, again, some of the popular answers that we've heard. Going forward, our housing is in a state of emergency, and the management of the housing is in a state of emergency. So I'm not looking for miracles, but we are in the 21st century, and I've watched several types of proposals come before our residents and be politically promoted. My question still is, or part of my question that usually doesn't get answered, is what type of timetable for achieving these specific goals that need to be addressed in repair, maintenance, infrastructure, and management of NYCHA. How long do you think, if you were to get elected, would you be able to put these things into place so that they would have an immediate impact on the conditions that we face in public housing?
You know, it's really hard to say how long it will take. To be honest, I can't give an exact number or an exact timetable, because it really depends on a lot of things, a lot of legalities, how much support we receive. So I can't say, I'm going to be 100% honest. I can't give a direct timetable, but I know that it'll be a priority for us. And that's why, and it's been a priority for me and for our party for years. We've been fighting for the fully funding of NYCHA, for its repairs, for it to stay public, and against its privatization. And I know that it will be a priority in our campaign and that we will fight for it. But there's so many moving pieces, even as mayor, that I don't have 100% full. I wouldn't have 100 full. Sorry, that's my dog. Full control over, that I would have to depend on other people and campaigning on a movement. But what I can say is, if we repeal the Fair Cloth Amendment And that's that's the one that doesn't allow for NYCHA, that currently doesn't allow for NYCHA to be expanded. And we begin to create new NYCHA developments, then we could build other buildings into public housing, like vacant luxury buildings that we can seize, which we have as part of our platform, in order for people to have homes. And these would be new buildings that are luxury, were created as luxury apartments that would now be considered public housing. On top of that, we, like I said, our priority is for residents to be involved in the oversight and restoration of NYCHA. And I apologize for my dog who continues to bark. Because at the end of the day, residents know best what needs to happen and are most invested in the outcome of making public housing better. So that's what I can commit to, is making NYCHA a priority in our in our time as mayor, and in my time as office, if it happens. But in terms of a direct timetable, I would be lying, and I don't think that anyone can actually give you a direct timetable at this point.
Thank you. Ms. Dana was on stack.
Thank you.
Ms. Dana Eldon was on stack. I don't know if you took your hand down. I'm calling on you now. And then I have Joshua following. Ms. Dana, going once?
Thank you, Marquise. I just want to respond to Ms. Rojas' answer in regard to reallocating or diversifying the budget of the police department. And as a former NYPD employee in community affairs, I think that is a drastic mistake. As it stands now, most PSA 7s are ill-equipped and ununiformed in their attempt to combat most of the crime that's in our developments, because they are short of staff now. And their district overload does not match their personnel. So taking more money from them would not work in my eyesight, but that's just my opinion. And as far as taking it from the military, I wouldn't be for that as well. I think the security is a main thing that most all Americans want. And we might not agree with all of the military standards by which they spend money or do research or whatever. However, I think the military should be strong for this country, and I wouldn't be for any debudgeting of that unit. But I do feel that perhaps if you look at the former programs that I'm acquainted with through NYPD, which are the community policing programs, and I'm not talking about the ones from 2000 and above, I'm talking about the ones from the 70s on, that were implemented in all our communities and were most effective. And that came because we had the personnel. So again, I would encourage you to maybe look at those studies, and you might change your mind in some respect to taking away from the budgeting. The what we call CCOP program back in the day was very effective, and any neighborhood I was in, I became a part of that neighborhood. And because I believe that because myself and others were a part of those communities, that crime was down for many periods, not just for a few, but many periods during my years, because the neighborhood and the community knew who you were. So again, I just invite you to look into the CCOP program of the 70s and the 80s. They were quite effective in association with the PAL program that we all know about and love. And I think that maybe the idea of defunding or reallocating their funds should be reconsidered. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing your experience and your experience in your community and your experience as a former NYPD. Just to explain a little bit, so when we're looking right now at, like you said, the NYPD community policing was the thing that, you felt worked very well. I would really, motivate for us to look at what parts of community policing work well, right? And, some of the things that you said, right? Like you became part of that community, you spoke to people. Those are all things that can be done with violence intervention programs, right? Where there are people from the community who are maybe were formerly involved in street organizations, people who are reputable from the community, people that the youth look up to, that are now mentoring youth, right? The only difference is that we're looking at how do we empower and transform our communities as opposed to continue to fund this cycle of criminalization. Right? So if you're thinking about community policing and like you're thinking, I like the Explorers program because I like the sports programs that they did. I like when they were mentoring youth in after school programs. I like that they became part of the community and they spoke with everybody, to everybody with respect. These are all things that violence intervention programs do. But what they don't do is that they don't work towards an angle of putting people maybe going towards Rikers Island, right? And criminalizing our youth, because we understand that only creates a cycle, right? For example, I'm a teacher. I've seen some of our young people that have been criminalized at a young age, gone to Rikers Island. They came out, they weren't able to find many resources for themselves in order to really empower themselves. And now they're back in the system. They've now had a kid that is now left without a father. They've now left their partner without an income. Their partner may now be getting evicted. So we see how criminalization has created cycles of impoverishment in our communities, right? So we're looking at what do we need to make our community safe without creating cycles of criminalization and cycles of impoverishment. Because if we look at communities that have been historically over policed or strongly policed, we don't see, this extreme decrease in crime, right? We see in comparison to like all of the other New York City neighborhoods, we don't see a strong decrease in crime. And that's because criminalization and sending people to Rikers, traumatizing them, and then bringing them back out without the adequate resources that they need to thrive, it won't actually create any type of empowerment or transformation for that community. So what we're doing is we're taking the good and we're leaving the bad, which is which is putting people behind bars for nonviolent and very petty crime. Now, in terms of the military budget, I mean, that's a very, very long conversation. I'll just give it, from my experience as my family's from Colombia. We saw when the Plan Colombia started and the war on drugs started, and the United States now began to send millions and millions of dollars to the Colombian military. And they said that it was all because of the war on drugs. And what we saw in Colombia was that the exportation of drugs when the military got there actually increased. And what also increased were human rights violations, because what they actually did, and you guys could look this up on like killercoke.org, but what they did is they trained these paramilitary death squads to protect the interests of US corporations abroad. And we've seen this in Iraq and in Afghanistan. And at the end of the day, we know that a lot of times when we go to war abroad, it's not necessarily for the best interest of working class people here, but it's for the best interest of the rich in those countries, right? And that's not necessarily fair to us as working class people paying those taxes, and it's not fair to the working class people of those countries who are being many times massacred. So that's why we're saying we need, instead of funding unnecessary wars that don't have anything to do with our security, let's fund what our people truly need, which is housing, education, healthcare, and all of these things.
Thank you. Oh, and we are definitely going to expand on the conversation around policing, because it's a fundamental question of what is the root cause of crime. And if we begin to explore the root causes of crime, then we have a better understanding of how to address crime. As Cathy mentioned, right, when you go to the most prosperous neighborhoods in this city and across the country, the first thing that you notice is the lack of police, right? And that is because they don't need police to keep their community safe. They're thriving off of the resources that they've been able to provide to their community. One of the number one factors of crime in this city, across the country, and across this globe is poverty. And addressing poverty is simultaneously, when you address poverty, you address the crime rate in our city and in our state. I'm sorry I had to throw that little disclaimer because it is a larger issue for not only the mayor, the governor, but the world to address and attack. Without that being said, let's talk a little bit about unions. I'm going to give you Josh Burnett.
Okay, hi. Good to see you here. I'm Josh Barnett. As Marquisha said, I'm a fellow city worker. I work for the Housing Authority, and I've been there since '99. And you know, I'm tempted to get into the whole discussion about the military because the $2 trillion spent in Afghanistan don't make me feel any safer, to tell you the truth. I understand what people are saying, but having said that, and every time I saw the military budget outlays, I'm thinking, how many roofs could we build with that kind of money? But the main thing that I did want to talk about is that NYCHA, among everything else, is horribly understaffed. That's one of the things that's really led to the debilitation of housing, as everybody's been talking about. When I started at the Housing Authority in '99, there were more than 15,000 workers. We're under 12,000 now. But we've also seen a simultaneous rise in consultants and outsourcing that's really sailed under the radar. And the main problem with public housing, as you said, is 40 years of chronic underfunding. That's the main thing that we need. But the other thing is that there needs to be a lot more hiring, a lot more resident hiring. And a lot, NYCHA basically keeps two sets of books, one they show everybody and one they keep for themselves. And on the floor where I work, you can't tell who the consultants are. You literally can't. And so what would we do to make sure that NYCHA not only got more funding and did fund things like the Green New Deal for public housing, which I totally support, but what do we do to make sure that we have more resident hiring, more union hiring, and more staff to maintain the buildings? Because I think that would go a long way towards addressing the poverty that Marquise is talking about, but also to make sure that we have long-term investment in public housing. Because if you fix the roof but nobody's there to maintain it, or if they hire some consultant who just walks away with the money, then you're basically back to where you started from.
Thank you, Joshua. Yes, so I'm also a city worker. I'm unionized. I'm part of the UFT, but I've had a long time defending unions. When I was in the last restaurant that I worked in, we were very, very close to building a union. We unfortunately lost that small battle, but it's something that I've been defending, that I continue to defend in the workplace. And we believe that all workers have the right to unionize and that they should be protected through collective bargaining. So we believe that the right to unionize should be enforced in action, not only in words. And what that means is protecting those who take union action or try to unionize in the workplace. We know that unions, people who work in unions, it helps increase their standard of living. It protects them from being fired unjustly. It gives them benefits, job security, and it's the first step towards creating worker power. But in terms of how we ensure that we continue to hire people from NYCHA, well, that's actually a federal requirement. Section 3 of the federal requirement says that they need to hire NYCHA residents first before they outsource, but they don't really do it. So we need to reinforce Section 3 and say that we are going to go penalize if they are not first looking to hire within NYCHA residents. But on top of that, we have a lot of overpaid administrators, overpaid contractors, and people on the ground making the buildings better, making sure that people have a good quality of life, need to have decent pay. Because these administrators that are just looking, that are making $400,000, that are just looking to privatize NYCHA and cut costs and make the living of NYCHA residents worse, should not be getting $400,000, while the people that are actually creating the better quality of life for NYCHA residents are struggling, right? And being evicted or not being able to make ends meet, right? So we're saying we should be cutting the salaries of top administrators, those making 6 figures and more, and using that to also better pay and provide more benefits for NYCHA workers.
Thank you. Next up, swinging to Manhattan, we have Ms. Ethel Velez.
Good afternoon, everyone. I just need a point of clarification about the police funds and exactly what monies are you talking about? Because when de Blasio was running, he ran on eliminating the $125 million that the Housing Authority was paying the police department, and yet there was no budget for the police department. So exactly what funds are you talking about? The mic.
Okay, so we're talking about our, this is from our research of the entire police budget, and we're talking about the budget in its entirety, including the lawsuits that they've paid, that they have to pay every year because of NYPD, either racial discrimination or abuse or police abuse. And in totality, it was a $10 billion NYPD budget that we calculated.
Thank you. Keeping you in Manhattan, bringing you to the Lower East Side, we have Ms. Aita Torres.
Good afternoon. I have a lot of questions, but I'm sure somebody has already said that, I've been on a campaign to be the chairperson for NYCHA, because when NYCHA was run by residents for residents, it was much better. One of the questions I have is, as mayor, will you look into, even though that's the controller's job, to ensure that all these outsourcers that we have that are being hired, they don't even live in New York State, which is incredible to me. And about hiring and really maintaining that residence. I'll give you a perfect example. During COVID, when they hired people to sanitize our developments, and they did a lousy job, my recommendation to the chair had been hire the residents, use the seasonal, and hire the residents within the developments where they live to do the cleaning, to sanitize, because they care about what happens to the residents there. So on that thread, what would you do to ensure that all of the, first of all, I would fire everybody if I was the chairperson. That's beside the point. Everybody knows that. And they probably quit anyway, but because it's so top heavy. And one of the real big issues that we're now facing is that people who know NYCHA, who came from NYCHA, who care about the residents, are now beginning to leave because of the disrespect that they get every day. And so how would you as mayor focus on ensuring that there's a cleanup in NYCHA, right? So that we begin to have quality of life that we deserve, that we're not getting. It's affecting our lives in terms of health and everything else.
Mhm.
Time.
Okay, so let me start with the first question. We definitely support Section 3 and NYCHA residents being the first to be hired for any type of jobs, and we want to reinforce that, and we want to penalize if Section 3 is not being followed through. In terms of the health issues in NYCHA, we know that even during COVID-19, NYCHA residents had a 30% higher rate of COVID-19 hospitalizations. And we know that NYCHA, people that live in NYCHA developments have higher rates of asthma, heart disease, diabetes, and environmental exposures that will increase kind of the impact of COVID-19, right? And we know this because of the lack of repairs that are being made, right? The paint that's being used, the fact that they're not, removing roaches and rodents. And like I said, our platform makes NYCHA a priority and public housing a priority to receive full funding by taxing by the rich, by reallocating funds in order to ensure that, and we also want to make sure that NYCHA is environmentally sustainable for the long run. So it is our priority to ensure that NYCHA residents are living in dignified conditions that are good for their health and not deadly. And even though the mayor can't reallocate more funds for public housing, it's something that, like more federal funds for public housing, it's something that we're willing to fight for. Like I said, we want to make NYCHA a priority. So even though there's a lot of decisions for NYCHA that I as mayor wouldn't have the direct power to make, it's something that I am committed to fighting for as a priority, and including reallocating federal funds and advocating for that on a nationwide level.
Thank you. So this is the time for those who I have missed, can't see, don't know how to raise your hand. You feel free to just come right off mute and ask a question if you have a question. Going once. Going twice. Mr. Hall, would you like to speak? Going once.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
Yes.
I have a question. Ms. Rojas, how are you going to attack this Bearcloth Amendment, best interests of, I guess I could say the have-nots? All right. Are you going to the federal government? What is your game plan with regards to that?
Yeah, we would definitely fight for it on a federal level, and we would advocate for that on a federal level. I mean, at the end of the day, New York City is one of the biggest cities in the entire world, and whoever becomes mayor is definitely going to have power, is going to have media attention in order to sway public opinion and create movements in defense of what they want to defend. And for me, if I become mayor, NYCHA will be on the top of my priority list in order to defend it on a national level and make New York City an example of what public housing could look like throughout the country and throughout the world.
Okay, one more thing. You were talking about breaking this cycle, going back into those repetitious crimes and criminality, so on and so forth.
Correct.
How do you feel this mental health inaptitude, which is urgently needed to break this cycle? I mean, how do you feel about that?
I mean, we know that mental health is very important and that we need to be funding mental health services in our communities and mental health services for our youth. We know that investment in mental health resources is necessary. It's something that we're advocating for. It's something that I advocate for personally in my school as a teacher, to ensure that every student who needs mental health services has access to them. And we know that a lot of our youth do not, and our youth, or not even youth, adults, elders, haven't had access to mental health resources. So we are committed to investing in mental health resources for our communities.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. And now keeping you in Manhattan, we have Ms. Carmen Quiones.
Hello, everybody. What I would like to know is, because of, we believe in resident management and home ownership. As mayor, what is your take on resident management? And before you become mayor, how can you come out with not only, with our group here, but with all groups, and talk about resident management and home ownership?
We are in support of resident management. We're in support of anything that will give residents more power over the space that they're living in. In terms of home ownership, I'm not sure what the question was. I mean, we want to promote and help make it easier for people to become homeowners, right? And we've also been thinking about what would be an affordable mortgage for, someone who lives in their home. I recently became a homeowner a few months ago, and we know that I know personally that it was close to, I had to jump lots of hoops, and it's extremely difficult for first time homeowners, for single, I only have my salary, and we know that we want to create more resources, make it so the down payment is lower, and make mortgage overall accessible to working class people so that people can become homeowners.
One more question. How fast will you fire the people in New York City Housing Authority? I think that our biggest problem is that they keep having the same people over and over. I understand that the reinvestment and the monies that we need for NYCHA is top priority, but we can't keep giving money to people that have actually really defrauded us. Took money away from presidents. We still don't know where that money is. Even the money that was given by the federal government, we still don't know how that money was spent. My thing is, why are we paying people at the top the money, and our people are still suffering with the conditions that they're living in? So we really need to get a hold of all those people and get rid of them. So how fast?
I mean, that definitely. So the conditions that NYCHA administrators have created are criminal, and specifically during the pandemic, right? We saw how NYCHA residents were most impacted, were more disproportionately impacted by COVID because of the underlying conditions that their living conditions have created for them, the underlying health conditions that have been caused by their living conditions. So we are committed to doing it as soon as possible. I think day one, when we go into office, not only do we want to fire them, but we want to penalize them for the conditions that they have created that are many times deadly for Black and Brown communities and working class people throughout New York City.
So again, what would you do now immediately?
So we would start doing it on day one, we're saying. Like, as soon as we go into office, we would start trying to create a plan in order to fire administrators and put residents in charge of NYCHA.
Will you come out right now and say that you're for home, rather resident management?
We've done that we've done that as a party. I could speak to, as a political party, we've called for the firing of NYCHA administration before in the past. We can do a statement about it, and I'll send it to Marquise.
That'd be great. Thank you.
Thank you.
What party are you in?
I'm in the Party for Socialism and Liberation. That's my political.
Okay.
I'll put my
Thank you. I'm looking, last call for questions, going once. Feel free to come off mute. Last call for questions, going 2 times. Feel free to go off mute. Last call 3 times. All right, let's talk money. As mayor, there are some things, right, that you can do. There are some things that are reserved for the state. There are other things that are reserved for the federal government. But the budget is where you will have a lot of control in the city. When you think about how much money you're going to be in control of as the mayor of New York City, how much will you commit to giving to NYCHA annually annually?
So we really, I mean, we don't have 100% of a dollar amount, but we know that we want to allocate as much as possible from the city budget that is necessary to fully fund all the repairs that are needed by NYCHA and advocate for state and federal funding. But we want to get to how much it was before it was cut under Giuliani, because it was much larger. The NYCHA budget was much larger until Giuliani came in and cut it. So we want to go back to that.
So the city had gotten a bunch of money from the the COVID-19 Recovery Act, and out of the $1 billion, I forget exactly how much. I don't know how much, but it was pennies on the dollar that they gave the New York City Housing Authority. And as you know, and as the Housing Authority has been stated, they're in a $40 billion deficit, or they estimate it to be at $40 billion. If we look at the numbers, and if we are to avoid the blueprint, that is $40 billion that we should be getting from the city, the state, and federal government. Mm-hmm. So again, right, and thinking about that $40 billion and being a little bit more specific, are you prepared to say $2 billion, excuse me, that's what it'd be, $2 billion annually from public housing at its fair share to cover the $40 billion that's needed, at least for the next 10 years?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that question? I'm sorry.
Yes, it's the same as the question before. More specifically, will you commit to $2 billion for at least 10 years, right, to address the $40 billion deficit?
Yes, we would commit to that. We know that the blueprint and other privatization plans, they barely make a dent in what is actually needed for NYCHA, and it makes life worse for residents, and they don't really fix the issue. So we want to commit to public funding for NYCHA.
Thank you so much. I am honored to have you. As I mentioned, we have walked side by side in the fight, in the struggle, and I am so honored to have you come and so inspired to see you run. I've been watching your campaign, as you know, for quite some time, so I'm excited to have you come and speak to the public housing residents. Thank you so much for giving up your Sunday. This is home, so whenever you want to come back and be with us, we're here every Sunday from 3 to 5. And as you heard through the questions and the comments that were going on as you were speaking, you're in a room full of experts, right? These are public housing resident leaders who have been at the front line of preserving public housing since day one, and they continue to do that, and they continue to mentor people like me and yourself. So anytime you need to tap in and brush up on it, this is home. You can come and learn more about public housing. But before we go, please share some parting words.
Well, thank you so much for having me. And it's honestly an honor to see you again and see you still in the movement and in the struggle, dedicated and fighting the good fight. Thank you all so much for having me. Thank you for your questions. Thank you for sharing your opinions with me and enlightening me about all the issues that are currently being faced by public housing residents. Like I said, housing to us is a human right. We believe housing should be public housing. We want New York City to become the example of what public housing should look like for the entire country and the world. And we're committed to that as a priority, and not just for the repairs and for the infrastructure, but also empowering residents to have a voice and make all the changes and solutions that are needed in NYCHA. So thank you all so much. Like I said, this isn't about just one day, about coming out November 2nd and voting for me, even though that would be great and I would love that. But it's about really committing to fighting for liberation at every level, right? And for fighting for it every single day and every single day after November 2nd, and staying organized, you know, continuing to fight, continuing to support each other, and continuing to be in solidarity with all the issues that working class people are facing throughout the city. And thank you guys so much again for having me. And, you know, it's really an honor to be here. Thank you.
Thank you. So you are definitely welcome to hang out and stay with us. We're going to keep going officially till 5. So feel free to hang out. If you got to go, we completely understand.
I have to head out, so I'm actually going to excuse myself, but thank you guys again.
Thank you. Have a good day. All right, so I got one more slide to take us out this conversation with, so bear with me as I share my screen again. All right, screen share. All right. Oh, so quickly, before I jump into this article, I'm going to drop it in the chat for a second time. But many of you asked about the Faircloth Amendment. This talks a little bit about the Faircloth Amendment, as well as a new program, surprise, surprise, that HUD has put out and connected the Faircloth Act along with RAD. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that later. But before I do, there's something even more important I need you guys to look out for. Let's get it. All right. And that is next Sunday. So you know that we have been speaking to all of the mayoral candidates, asking them, trying to find out where they stand, who is the better candidate, right? The strongest candidate for public housing. We also need to do that with the city council. We have a really good opportunity this go around. There are going to be 35, at least 35 new council members. So that completely shifts, completely changes the entire makeup of the city council, giving us the potential to have a stronger city council that prioritizes public housing. Now, it's been said by many, one of the major issues that we have, or one of the major reasons why we have the issues that we have, is because we don't lobby. We don't let our elected officials know what we need. We're not always showing up in Washington and Albany and in City Hall, putting pressure on our elected officials and being crystal clear on what it is that we want. And so, again, as they are getting ready for their final election on November 2nd, we want to make sure before they are elected into office that they have their marching orders, that we make it clear that if you are going into City Hall to represent us, these are the things that we want you to be calling for. These are the laws that we want you to vote for. This is where we want you to put the funds. So what I need you to do is not only attend, but I need you to make sure that public housing residents are here. As you know, we provide a space where residents can voice their opinions, their thoughts, and their expertise. So we need more experts in the room. So I'm asking you to help share this. You may have seen this on Facebook and on Twitter. I will share this again in the chat so that you can have a photocopy and you can put it on your own Facebook or Twitter. It's definitely more powerful if you go to our Facebook and Twitter account and share it and just click the share button. Again, we need to be clear on what it is that we are asking for. I want to open up and have a little bit of discussion with you all about what it is that we should be asking the city for, but I also want us to be clear, right, on the jurisdiction, right? There is what the federal the federal government has authority and jurisdiction over, that is what the state has jurisdiction over, and that is what the city has jurisdiction over. And it's important, right, to understand what levels of government has the responsibility and authority to do what, so that we are clear on what we're asking, and that we are clear that they have the ability to give us what it is that we are asking. So finally, again, I beg you to please make sure you register today. I am going to drop the registration link into the chat box again. I am also going to ask that you share this with other public housing residents. And I know that some of you are very political, because our survival depends on us being political and knowing on what's going on in the political game. So if you know any city council members who are running for the first time, who won the Democratic or Republican nominee seat, and you have a way to contact them, please get this invite to them as well. Those are the elected officials we want to make sure are in the room, that they understand what it is that we are asking of them. We can't hold them accountable if we didn't tell them what it is that we want. So thank you so much. I hope that you will share this, and let's talk a little bit more about what it is we should be asking the city.
Marquise, do we have a letter, like a formal letter inviting them to this?
Yes, we do have a formal letter. Anyone who needs a copy of that formal letter can email me, and I will forward you over a copy. Mr. Hall, I don't know if you're raising your hand or asking for a formal copy, a formal letter.
I need the copy.
Okay.
I need the copy.
I need the copy too.
I will get it to both of you. And we have Ms. Nydia. How you doing? So I am curious. We're going to be having a city council here next week, and I am curious if you guys think it's a sufficient number, if it's too high, too low, to ask the city, mayor and city council for $2 billion annually. So if you guys don't start jumping, I'm gonna start picking on y'all. How much should we be asking for the city to fund us? What should we be asking for?
$7 billion.
7 billion. Why 7 billion?
First of all, the city budget, in my opinion, should be making sure that public housing is a priority. Technically, I would say 10 billion, but I haven't been keeping up with how much the city budget actually is these days. But the same way the Transportation Authority, schools, and police department get the same type, get funding as essential services. Public housing is essential. Not only is it essential, it's a major part of the housing infrastructure of the city of New York. They should be investing, in my opinion, a certain percentage of the budget of the New York City in housing. And I think that the elected officials, the ones who are in there coming back, and the new elected officials in the city government need to make that one of their priorities, to author and pass a bill that is going to annualize and line item public housing in the city of New York to the tune of $7 to $10 billion a year.
All right, I hear you, Miss
Claudia. 2
billion.
I was taught, aim for the stars and you might reach the treetops. If you ask for 20, you might get 10. But the point is, all jokes aside, Marquise and my colleagues, this is the 21st year of the 21st century, which means 1/4 of 100 years is almost gone, and we'll be in the next century in 75 more years, 77 more years, 78 more years, we'll be in the next century. All right. Public housing has been abandoned, ignored, and critically underfunded deliberately by the elected officials in the city. And in my opinion, they have had a social and humanitarian obligation to make sure that we had not only housing, but high quality housing for the low income working class people of this city. And there's no reason in the world why it can't be restored to that. And in my opinion, a major investment of $10 billion a year over 3 or 4 years, or the lifetime of the terms of these people we're about to elect to the city council, will in one way put us in the right direction. And in addition to the $10 billion line item, really pass some laws that will give them real oversight, or give us real oversight of the city, of the NYCHA institution. I always look at it as a joke when the city council has oversight hearings and they really have no laws that give them power over NYCHA. The only person in City Hall that has power over NYCHA is the mayor. Everybody else exercises a little influence because they're elected officials, but there are no legal statutes on the books that give the city council any oversight power over NYCHA. And I think that attached to the $10 billion ask, we need to make sure that these elected officials start really legislating to get the kind of power that we're supposed to have over managing NYCHA.
Thank you. I saw Claudia putting some numbers in the chat box. Can I put you on spotlight? And then we'll go to Ramona for a very quick presentation. Claudia, can I put you on spotlight?
Hey, hi everybody. Excuse the noise in the background, but yeah, the city has enough money to donate that 10 billion. So I totally was in agreement with what Mr. Bowman was saying. You know, also when you look at the regulations, they've never given us or even went through the process of abiding by the rules in which they're supposed to, where the residents are supposed to be on the management level. So a lot of the people that do get into office, they always talk about changing. So how you're going to change something, right? If you haven't tried what's there for the residents already to see if it's working. So that's one of the ways that they always try to take our rights away from us. And we don't know that because a lot of us don't know or understand. And when I say us, I mean us in totality as a 400,000 benchmark, because for it only to be about 40 people on this line, it should be more. But that 10 billion is something that we can ask and they can give and they should give. And it's about time that they start abiding by the same laws, rules, and enforcements in which they hold us so severely accountably for.
Thank you. I think we lost Ramona.
Mikey?
Yeah.
Yeah, just want to add an extension to what's already been said. Our local officials, they can help advocate for us and be a part of what we do if they care about the districts in which they work. They are elected, city council people are elected to cover districts. So while they talking to the mayor and they act as little mayors, they can always advocate for us and help us get this damn money from Congress, who has not funded HUD in over 20 some damn years. So these are the kind of things that we need these people who running for office. And if they don't win, they need to be a part of us and build this coalition and connect all of us together in order to save this city. If they really care about the areas in which they want to be elected and be in power, then this is what they need to be doing. Thank you.
I agree with you there. So some of you are a little bit shy, but we really do need to have a firm ask. So I am asking seriously, for numbers. I am with Mr. Bowman. We should be asking high. I just want to make sure, right, that we're also asking for a realistic number, and that's why I'm appreciative of Claudia for giving us that city budget number. But in the chat box, if you are a little shy, please put a number in the chat box. Do you agree with Mr. Bowman that we should be asking the city for $10 billion annually? If not, please put a number in the chat. This is something that we're going to take back to the steering committee and actually come up with a final number that we present next week when we do our city council briefing. So please, I'm looking for that chat box to start lighting up, drop some numbers in there. And as we are wrapping up, any final thoughts? Going once? Going
Yes,
for-
hello.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Oh, go ahead, Miss.
Go ahead.
Sorry, real fast. I also agree with the 10 billion. They have it, they can afford it. That way, if they want to bargain us down, we don't go any lower than 7. But we should start at 10 billion, 100%. In addition, any new council members coming in, we need to insist that they support us on no RAD, no pact, no blueprint. And I stand firm on this. It needs to stop. It needs to stop now. Okay, if NYCHA isn't disrespecting our tenants bad enough, the new managements are disrespecting them worse. And I say this because I've been sitting in on Zooms on the Manhattan B bundle that's currently going on at Wise Towers in half of Manhattan, and PRC management does not know what they're doing. They have already been cited for having unlicensed contractors, unlicensed inspectors, and for the first time in the history of Wise Towers, one of our residents opened up his window and took a step out yesterday. We've never had a suicide at Wise Towers until yesterday, and it's because of the way Pierre speaks to them. And Pierre works for PRC management, and he's condescending. He yells at the tenants. He disrespects them. Manhattan Borough President Gail Brewer wrote a letter about all the things that they've done wrong in this bundle, and he told all the tenants she lied on them. This needs to stop. So any new person coming in has to be 100% with us on no more RAD, no more pact, and definitely no blueprint, or else we don't need them.
Right, and Gail Brewer just
My
won
condolences.
yes, sorry, yes, we should start there. Condolences to the young man who passed. Thank you, Aisha. And Gail Brewer just won the Democratic nominee for City Council. So she's definitely someone who should be here and who should be talking. And I agree, right? As we put together the list of things on the platform that we're asking the City Council and the city to sign on to, one is $10 billion, right? If that is the number we lock in on. The second is no to the blueprint, no to RAD. We want yes, right, to save in Section 9. Others, what else should we be talking about with the city? Mr. Hall.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
Marquis, after hearing what I just heard, what just took place, and I'm gonna wait for Tuesday for the steering committee, but I think we need to develop an action plan, all right? And focus on what was just said, and let's make something of this. This is of a large magnitude. All right, I'm getting small feedbacks from some of the other PAC developments. Little things like they put sprinklers in the back of benches so people can hang out. They little things, but this is something that's horrific. And I'm very sorry to hear something of that stature, but I think we really need to rally behind this event and take a stand, all right, from many angles. So but we'll talk about it Tuesday. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. And then I'm gonna bring Carmen into the conversation.
Okay. I first of all, Who said
Marquise,
Marquise?
could you put that invite in the chat so I can send it out to the resident?
Yes, I'm gonna do that now while I'm
Okay.
just talking.
Yeah,
Thank you.
so you want, hi, you want to say something? It's okay. You want to say something before me?
No, I just wanted him to put that thing in the chat so I can forward it out. I'm sorry.
Okay, no, not a problem. First of all, my condolences. And I have to tell you that I've had, since I've been TA president, I've had young people commit suicide. So on that note, I asked that the fencing be done in a special way in Smith. And NYCHA's response to me was, this is the legal number, and that's exactly what they did.
Wow.
Lo and behold, I had a senior Asian commit suicide. So I am so sorry, because it's horrible. You feel like you haven't done enough.
With the fence. This had nothing to do with a fence.
No. But the reason I asked for the fence was because one of the things about suicide is that, sometimes they have a moment of thinking. And so what I wanted, the fence was for prevention, so that it wouldn't make it easier for people to jump, right? That if it made it a little bit more difficult, maybe they would think, wait, maybe I need help, right? And that's what I'm saying. And it's been, so I really am sorry.
I understand, but he went out the window and he landed in the rubble where they're doing all the construction at. Because there's no dumpsters. There's not one dumpster to pick up any debris. They're literally throwing the debris in the playground area. So he dove right into the rubble.
Oh my God. That's sad.
This
Either
gotta
way, it's
stop.
sad. It's just sad.
Just gotta stop. It's gotta stop.
Yeah, I agree.
Thank you. Carmen, you were putting some information in the chat. You want to talk a little bit about what you put in the chat?
I just think that, we have to start advocating for more counselors and more mental health experts to start coming into New York City Housing Authority. We have a lot of mental illness in NYCHA and all of these developments. And not only that, we do have a lot of domestic violence. And until we start addressing those things, we're gonna, God forbid, but we're gonna keep seeing things like this, and it's sad. But there used to be a time when NYCHA had counselors on staff. We need to advocate, and we need to make it really top priority to the city council that comes in, that they need to give us back the things that we had. And we had counselors, we had social workers, we had all of this right on site. COVID, one thing COVID has shown me is that mental illness is truly, truly alive. And if we don't address these things, just like domestic violence, I'm gonna have something for domestic violence on the 30th. But if we don't start addressing these things, we're gonna see more and more deaths. So that's all I really wanted to say. And I think that's something we definitely need to talk to the city council about, because like you said, they are districts and they should adhere to what their district needs. And mental illness and domestic violence is running rapid, and we need to address it.
Hello.
Mr.
Hello.
Yes.
Okay, you are absolutely right. My name is, again, when I introduced myself earlier, I'm Eugenia Gibson, and I thank you guys for letting me be in this meeting. This is the first meeting. It's very interesting. The ideas, very good. I totally agree with the 10 million, and I am not one that goes for PAC, RAD, and all that other nonsense. Question that I want to ask now, I heard the lady say about defunding the police. I remember I've been in the developments in Beach 41st Street since the development's been moved out, came back and been in my apartment for 30 years. I remember when we used to have the housing police doing the beat. in our developments, they took it away from us. I believe, and I mean, just tell me if you agree, I believe that we should have that again. With all this stuff that's going on, wouldn't you think that we would need the police to do the beat back in our developments again?
So thank you. I am really glad this came up, right? Because aside from who I'm gonna vote for, I really do, just being honest with you, agree with a lot of things that Cathy mentioned. The truth, the conversation, right, isn't necessarily about getting rid of the police. Some of us are more radical on that end. But the conversation about defund the police is not about getting rid of the police. It's about two things. It's about one, recognizing and understanding and examining the root causes of crime so that we can truly, right, get rid of crime. If we understand the root causes, then we address the root causes, not the symptoms, right? The second the second thing is you really do have to look at the city's budget, right? If the city has a budget of $80 billion, the city spends more than 40 billion of that on law enforcement, right? So it's about balancing the city's budget. We should not be paying more, for example, for an inmate than what we pay for a student. We should be investing more in our students, because if we invest more in our students, we can ensure that they don't become the next one in line to be an inmate, right? And so again, it's not about saying we want our communities to be unsafe, right? It's about recognizing that we have more tools on our belt than just police officers. If everything, right? If everything, if all you have is a hammer, then everything looks like a nail, right? And so we have to think about all the different tools. Crime or poverty is the number one factor. When you think about those young men who are on the corner selling drugs, guess what? I can promise you that 9 out of 10 of them, if not the full 10, don't want to have to be on that corner selling drugs and putting their safety at risk, much less poisoning their community. They do it because they are caught up in this never-ending cycle of being able to gain money. If you make one mistake in our criminal justice system, it haunts you for your entire life. As someone who's been labeled a criminal, you don't qualify for food stamps and welfare. You don't qualify to live in public housing. You can't turn your life around and go to college because you can't get tap and pal, right? How is a person who made a mistake actually going to come out and have the chance to redeem himself, right? And so we spend more money in focusing on healing the person and lifting up the person versus criminalizing the people. We would find, like those white communities, those rich communities, that we actually don't need the police. Because when we invest in people, people don't have a need to go and sell drugs on the street, right? They can become the businessman that those skills have provided to them, right? If you are selling drugs on a corner, that requires business skills. I don't care who you are, you have to think like a businessman to move your product, right? So why not change that thinking? Why not take the drugs out of their hand and give them a better product to work with, right? And the same could be true for all these different crimes that we have out there. Survival crimes, people with mental disabilities. These are all the areas that we should be looking at, as opposed to feeding more money into the criminal justice system. It's not about letting our neighborhoods run amok. It's about doing the real work, right? And using every single tool that we have, not just one tool.
Yeah, Marquise, that was very well said. If communities would thrive, if we had great jobs for these youngsters, if you had more people going into schools rather than hanging out in front of storefronts and so forth, as you mentioned as a metaphor, had a better product, I mean, we would be able to thrive. you would then begin to see you don't need as many police to police the areas. When you don't have these sort of things, then they relevate to crime and drastic disobedience and things of that nature. Monies need to be back in communities. When I came up, we had model cities. We had manpower. All of these things were defunded and sent to go fight a damn war. See, so those politicians who were in there helping making decisions, they made bad decisions and poor decisions. You had people who worked for the city trying to change it, get a damn paycheck and did nothing. And they just let the city slip away. So now that you're overpopulated, now you want to say it's a problem. It was a problem back in the 70s. It's still a problem now, exacerbated by a multitude of people. So this is what's really going on. So if we could find ways to get community centers open, people keeping them from going into jails and having a second chance at life, we might be able to see a thriving place. But do they want us to thrive? No. So we're going to have to go like there are no reserved seats, take what we can get and hold on to it, just like A. Philip Randolph taught us to do. Thank you.
Amen. And with that, I'm going to officially close the meeting. And by close, I mean turn off the record button. But if anybody wants to hang out and after hour, please feel free to stay.
Okay.
And I would love
Marquise, Joel and Priscilla wanted to